she listened to the minister, Vernon Kerr, giving the eulogy. He chirped on about Abe's achievements, peppering in things like pillar of the community, astute businessman, and a legacy that will live on for generations. But there were also phrases like his sometimes rigid approach to life and an often firm hand in dealing with others. Perhaps those were the polite ways of saying flamin' bunghole. The sound of the minister's voice blended with the drizzle that pinged on the sea of mourners' umbrellas. Gripes and mutters rippled through the group of about 100 people who'd braved the unpredictable October 30th weather to come to Parkman's cemetery. Or Snooty Hill, as Janessa had heard some call it. The Parkmans might be the most prominent and richest family in Last Ride, and their ancestor might have founded the town, but obviously some in her gene pool weren't revered. Margot continued to gripe and mutter as well, but her comments were harsher than the rest of the onlookers because she'd likely gotten plenty of fallout from Abe's firm hand. It was possibly true of anyone whose life Abe had touched. Janessa certainly hadn't been spared from it. Still, Abe had managed to attract and convince 2 women to marry him, including Janessa's own mother, who'd been his first wife. Janessa figured the convincing was in large part because he'd been remarkably good-looking, along with having mountains of money. But it puzzled her as to why the women would tie themselves, even temporarily, to a man with a mile-wide mean streak. A jagged vein of lightning streaked out from a fast-approaching cloud that was the color of a nasty bruise. It sent some of the mourners gasping, squealing, and scurrying toward their vehicles. They parted like the proverbial sea, giving Janessa a clear line of sight of someone else. Brody Harrell. Oh, for so many reasons, it was impossible for Janessa not to notice him. For an equal number of reasons, it was impossible not to remember him. Long and lean, Brody stood out in plenty of ways. No umbrella, for one. The rain was splatting onto his gray Stetson and shoulders. No funeral clothes for him either. He was wearing boots, jeans, and a long-sleeved blue shirt that was already clinging to his body because of the drizzle. Once, years ago on a hot July night, she'd run her tongue over some of the very places where that shirt was now clinging. Yes, impossible not to remember that. Brody was standing back from the grave. Far back. Ironic, since according to the snippets Janessa had heard over the years about her father, Brody was the person who'd been closest to Abe, along with also running Abe's sprawling ranch, Colts Creek. If those updates, aka gossip through social media and the occasional letter from Abe's head housekeeper, were right, then Brody was the son that Abe had always wanted but never had. It was highly likely that he was the only one here who was truly mourning Abe's death. Though he wasn't especially showing any signs of grief. It probably wasn't the best time for her to notice that Brody's looks had only gotten a whole boatload better since her days of tongue-kissing his chest. They'd been 17, and while he'd been go-ahead drownin' me hot even back then, he was a 10-ton avalanche of hotness now, with his black hair and dreamy brown eyes. His body had filled out in all the right places, and his face, that face, had a nice edge to it. A mix of reckless rock star and a really naughty fallen angel who knew how to do many, many naughty things. A loud burst of thunder sent even more people hurrying off. "Sorry for your loss," one of them shouted to Brody. Several more added pats on his back. 2 women hugged him, and one of the men tried to give Brody his umbrella, which Brody refused. You didn't have to be a lip reader to know that one of those women, an attractive, busty brunette, whispered, "Call me," in his ear. Brody didn't acknowledge that obvious and poorly timed booty call offer. He just stood there, his gaze sliding from Abe's tombstone to Janessa. Unlike her, he definitely didn't appear to be admiring anything about her, or remembering that he'd been the one to rid her of her virginity. Just the opposite. His expression seemed to be questioning why she